closing conversation, we need your full attention because we want to bring everything back to the group. And I know you'll understand that it's impossible to do this in an engaging manner, in a way that we go table by table and listen to what everybody has been discussing. But as you saw in each of your groups, we have our lovely colleague rapporteurs that have been noting every single word that you've been saying, so we do have it. We do also have our ISD reporting service team there in the back that are also paying attention to everything that is being said. We also have the video team that is capturing all of the essence of the event, the full video that is being taken for the live stream, so no worries, we have everything. We're not going to lose everything or anything that has been said. And I also should mention that what comes out of the groups will also try to summarize. Some of you already discussed it this way in the groups and agreed on some bullet points that you really wanted to highlight. Then for the others, we'll go through the notes and try to bring it down to some concrete points and put this together in sort of a closing outcome document for this event and this day. And we hope to, of course, offer it as a statement, a position paper to inform not only the discussions being held now for HLPF, but then hopefully also the ones coming in September. So definitely stay tuned, look out for the video that we'll share as well, and the reports from ISD. And this session is for us to start making some commitments, statements about what we want to do different. And the first person that we'll hear from is Xu Haoliang, who is the Associate Administrator from UNDP and is here also to give us some words about what we can do differently as we move forward towards 2030. So please, Dr. Xu, come on and take the stage.
First of all, I unfortunately don't have a PhD. This is my lifetime regret. And just unfortunately, I wish I had a PhD. Once in university in a developing country, wanted to do an honorary doctoral degree. I really felt that I didn't pursue it. Because I think PhD really needs to be learned. So I don't have it, unfortunately. But I have 2 masters, so it's compensation a little bit. So I'm very happy to be here. Really, President General Assembly, President of the International Science Council, and also colleagues and friends. I'm supposed to have 5 minutes. I used the 1 minute already. And this is about evidence based decision making, right? Disabilities about it. So what can I say, really, to a group of experts who have been working on this issue all the time? I thought I'd probably just to a couple of examples of what we're doing to use evidence to try to help our developing country partners to achieve these SDGs. One example I want to give is about the issue of debt. As you know, there's a serious debt stress among developing countries. And different studies show that 50 to 60 countries are in debt stress right now. That means they either are struggling to pay the debt service or they're on the verge of default. So, what does that mean for SDGs? So how can we do something to urge action? Because the Secretary General has really tried to call for actions through this SDG stimulus bills. What can we do? Because the decisions are not in the hands of a lot of UN member states, unfortunately. The UNDP certainly cannot make that happen. But we can do something to really call for action. So 2 days ago, we published a report called The Human Cost of Inaction, Poverty, Social Protection, and Debt Service. So we wanted to really use evidence to say that it is serious, the situation is serious. Why? 46 countries spend more than 10% of their government revenue for debt payments on their external debts. So 46 countries spend more than 10% of their national budget for debt payments, debt service. And in low-income countries, they spend 2.3 times more on debt servicing than on social assistance, and 1.4 times more on debt servicing than on health expenditure. So, as a result of it, 160 million people have fallen into poverty since 2020. So this is what we're trying to do, use evidence, use data to speak on issues. But we're not just stopping at pointing out the problems, because to lift the 165 million people out of poverty, the world only needs to spend $12.24 billion a year. 0.009% of the world's GDP. So our simulation will show that can be done. So this is, I think, the power of evidence that what we are talking about. And one more example very quickly. As we all know, only 12% of the SDG targets are on track, based on the Secretary's latest progress report. Also, the global standard development report that was published. So Secretary General's notion, right, is that we need a rescue package. But how? We have been talking about SDGs for quite some time. So what can be done? What can you indicate to add value to this call for action for the rest of the people? What we are doing now is that, in fact, we are working about 100 countries, with 100 country governments who have developed what's called SDG, integrated SDG analytics, to show where the actions can have the biggest impact to close the gap for the SDGs, for the major SDGs. There's a lot of analysis, we know that. All kinds of reports, SDG reports, country profiles. But what would be most useful is where actions can be most effective. We're trying to find these evidence. So we're using machine learning for organized government to analyze the national priority documents, whether it's planning, whether it's progress, all kinds of national priority documents on the priorities. So it will tell us what the government's priorities are, which we already know, but we want validation. Now we know the interconnections between the SDGs, different SDGs. They are already standardized templates. But what we are doing is to plot the progress against what governments say are priorities. And they immediately see the connections between the priorities that governments say are the priorities and where the SDGs are getting that actually will have impact on achieving these priorities. We often see, for example, if we take actions on the institutional quality, the quality of governance, we can actually help achieve a lot of lagging SDGs if we just focus on some of the actions. So these are the kind of evidence we try to find to help the SDGs fund that is going to take place in September. And I hope that we're doing this together. And I'm very happy that the UNDP working with coordinating this event. And I hope with this kind of discussion, we will generate synergies in our different organizations and really help achieve us in the next 7 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Xu, and thank you also for mentioning the debt conversation, because that was a topic that came up quite a bit in Group 6 on policy coherence, and in terms of having very little resources sometimes available to do many things, and how important it is to pool them all to the same agenda, because otherwise we're just running ourselves very thin and not really getting anywhere ahead or anywhere forward. So everything that you're saying resonates with what the team was discussing, so thank you. And now we're going to hear from somebody else, Salvatore Arico, who is the CEO of the International Science Council. And Salvatore, you have a very easy question to answer, and that is, what is your personal commitment today, after everything you've heard, what are you going to do?
That was a tough one. But I have two personal commitments. One is to try and be as short as possible, because I'm basically between you and your lunch. But otherwise, I think a more personal / institutional commitment, that is that on behalf of the International Science Council, we would like to pursue and strengthen this wonderful relation that is unfolding with the multilateral system, the United Nations, the Mother Agency, and the various UN organizations that we work with. And I try and explain how we intend to do that. I think we heard very strong messages from the representatives of the policy community here today. Scientists can and must be part of the decision making. That's a groundbreaking message from the President of the General Assembly. Science is the bedrock and foundation of the 2030 agenda from Her Excellency Ambassador Jordan. Very, very powerful. As Gispa Tolisano referred to the fact that science can act as the glue and help provide interlinkages among the goals so as to make progress. So, on the other hand, on the scientific community, on the side of the active scientific community, we heard Peter Blackman, the president of the ISC, essentially putting forward some kind of self-criticism on behalf of the scientific community, in the sense that we need to do science differently, perhaps not to flip the science enterprise completely, but to make sure that we can pivot, so that we need a big science approach applied to transdisciplinary science if we want to make real progress. And Albert van Weersdorp, the Director General of Alianza, also in a rather self-critical way said that there is a need for new ways to explore, new pathways to discovery. So that is to say that, in my mind, in my analysis, two very interesting developments are taking place. On the one hand, the policy community is actually asking for more science. So there is a growing demand for science out there. And on the other hand, the active scientific community is waking up and realizing that science has to get out of the ivory tower and reach out to society. So, in terms of concrete steps, how do we make that dialogue and interaction happen? First of all, I think there is a need to demystify science. Science is not truth. Science is a process, among others, to generate knowledge, to assess that knowledge on a systematic basis. What's happening today is that there is now a very strong policy enabling framework for science. Now, science should operate freely and independently, and several scientists in the room may say science needs no policy enabling framework. But if there is a demand, a policy demand for science out there, then science can respond and become, in a way which is more relevant, more timely, and in a language which is more cogent and more silent, and therefore science can be more impactful. President Carosi did not use the word institutionalizing. There is a need to institutionalize the science policy interface, but I take the liberty to say that because there is a need. There are mechanisms in place. Yes, ASGs, Polisano mentioned a few. We have a number of scientific assessments, we have the technology facilitation mechanism. But what's missing is the articulation. Because it's not simply a matter of for science to tell policymakers this is what you should be doing. And it's not a matter of policymakers to say, well, okay, thank you very much, but we have some other business to conduct.
it's really a matter of how we articulate that dialogue. And again, building on what has been said, that is something quite concrete. It's about aligning institutions, capabilities and resources. It's not only about what needs to be done, but also about how. Because sometimes in that interaction between active scientists and stakeholders, algorithm scientists, new knowledge can emerge and solutions. So all of that to say that in my mind, on behalf of the International Science Council, it's a pretty historic moment, and largely thanks to the leadership, President Koroshi, whose motto has always been, since the very beginning, sustainability. Science has been an integral part of his motto since the beginning, and we cannot afford to lose that momentum. And I think that this Science Day on a Saturday morning, so well attended at the highest level, is a clear demonstration that the journey started only now, and we can't miss that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy. We were also very connected to the group discussions because we were talking so much about evidence and how science can support. And it was really interesting to hear from the group of PhDs here that was discussing quite a bit about how science is not necessarily only about data and numbers, but also social data, and making sure that that is something that is included in the conversation. So that's very well linked, as well as the conversation that we had on evidence, well, actually on the underlying conditions for the SDG. And Sophie, where are you? And there we go, the table over there that was discussing so much about localizing the SDGs and the good examples of Japan and the local voluntary reviews. And that also connects to localizing science. That's also something that came up in the discussions earlier, and how to get science and knowledge to the ground level and translate it the best possible way for everybody else. Ambassador Bailey was making that point quite a bit in the opening. So we have a lot to discuss, and now I want to hear from Åsa Persson, who is our Deputy Director at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and also representing here the independent group of scientists for the Global Sustainable Development Report. And I know Åsa won't be too humble to say, but she was also just appointed chair of the body advising the Swedish government on climate policy. Say also a little bit more of what that is. But Åsa, your question is as easy as Torres, because it's not about your personal commitment only, but what would you like us here in the room to do different in the second half of implementation? So you get to give us a task if you want to.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I will try to be even briefer than Salvatore. It's not done in the way of lunch, but I think more than food, of course, continued networking. It seems like this is a very appreciated and productive event in all the group discussions. Just to share a few takeaways from what I have heard today that I think are very useful going forward for our institute, but I think more so for the whole scientific community and the science policy interface. I think we heard about making change at the system level, and I would really support the commitment to mission-driven science from our partners at ISC, and also to make some bold reforms in science funding, for example, funding on transboundary science partnerships. Very important, not just for producing relevant knowledge, but also for science diplomacy. However, to also complement that picture of sort of bold, transformative, mission-driven science, I think also we heard a lot today about the demand for practical knowledge, practical science, the tools, analytical tools, or participatory tools to really work with SDGs at the local, national, regional levels. From SEI, we will continue to work with the SDG Synergies tool, and Yvonne can tell you more about how that works and how it has been applied in different contexts around the world. We, I think, also share the sort of picture of science policy process in terms of a typology of generating knowledge, synthesizing knowledge, and utilizing knowledge. And this process would be bidirectional, not unidirectional. Wearing my scientist hat, I would, there's a part of this process that I would like to invest more in and focus more on is synthesis. We know that we have a proliferation of science, more scientific papers than ever are being produced, but how do we make it accessible to policymakers? How can we ensure that we produce cumulative knowledge and not avoid reinventing the wheel? So that, I think, is a really clear call to action to prepare more synthesis, to not just provide shopping lists of things we need to do, but also costing them, prioritizing them, assessing them from various criteria, talking more about sequencing of policy interventions, talking more about policy mixes and timetables. And I know also in the discussions on the GSDR, we have been thinking a lot about how can that process be even elaborated more in terms of synthesizing the large quantity of science on SDGs. Finally, the issue of trust in science was raised. We live in a very information-rich society, but also a post-truth society. And here I think it's very important to think about the sustainability of science itself. So going forward, I think many of us are committed to impactful science and producing very relevant science. We want to understand the needs from users and policymakers, but we also need to safeguard the integrity of science and the scientific method, which is really the source of authority for science, that unique authority and voice that science enjoys today. So some really clear and strong takeaways. Personal commitment, finally, it's a tough one, and I thank you for even raising that question, Lauren. I think you did it so eloquently in the start, because as scientists, we are quite used to preaching to others what they need to do, but I think this is a moment to really, as scientists, to take our responsibility and model the change we want to see. So, for me, I think one key takeaway is that we need to, in the way we communicate science, and think about the question intelligence. How do we move beyond the we need transformation, we need to see this change, but really go to the questions of how do we achieve that change? How has it been done before? How have impediments been overcome? So with that, I end here, and before handing over to Yvonne and Laurel to finish off, I also want to thank you very much. So please join me and give an applause to the organizers.
Thank you so much, Osal, for this. And one thing that you said that was really important and connects a lot with what the groups were discussing was you were talking about short-reading science, or making sure that we make some brief translation of what's being said in our research. And the table, where's James? Which table were you at? Right here. Right here. You guys, right? You were talking so much about not only having tools or methods, but really tools and methods that are fit for purpose and that are useful for what they are needed, and that is extremely important. And also talking about making them have sense for who's going to use them, in terms of what you all discussed on cost effectiveness, for example, of everything that's being used as evidence. So that's so connected to what Osa was saying. Thank you very much for listening to these words and for everything that you shared in the groups. We are learning already so much from those discussions. And I now want to hand over to my moderator, because she has even more things for us now before we close those.
We're going to have one more speaker, and then the hard work comes to you next. So if you were nervous thinking poor Salvatore had to come up and say what his personal commitments are. He's coming back to all of you next. So feel the same level of stress, and I will hand over while you're feeling stressed to the PGA president.
Thank you, Laura. Many thanks to all of you. Could I have a request to the organizers and to all of you? In September, we shall have an SDG summit, 1.5 days. The major question of that SDG summit will be the credibility. Leaders from different parts of the world will come here in order to tell the world that the remaining 7.5 years of implementation of SDGs will be different from the first 7.5 years. And their pledges, their commitment should be credible. That moment of credibility, in my understanding, is still to be built. Therefore, my request to you would be, through the organizers, please send to the leaders, via this channel, 5 of those points where you see that you could help policymakers. 5 very simple sentences. If you wish, 5 game changers that can be taken into the equation and can make the commitment to have the remaining 7.5 years more credible than the previous 7.5 years. If we can do it, you did a miracle. But you are here to make miracles. Thank you very much.
More pressure. It's what we like at the close. So I'll ask if someone from the organizing team will take the podium down, and that's okay. So next is back to you. What we want to do in the last few minutes that we have together, 2 things, 2 requests, perfectly aligned with what you just heard from the PGA president. The first is that we have all spent a lot of time thinking together, right? Bringing the best of what we know, what it could be, where the gaps are, what could be next, your individual fields of expertise, which you studied, your applied experience. We brought this into the room today. Now we want to bring something else, and that's your hearts. So I'm going to ask you to think back to what motivated you to join your particular fields in the first place. For some of you, maybe that was a year or 2 ago, for others, more than a year or 2 ago. But what was that? What motivated you? What struck you at the time? Where did you want to be? What did you want to do? Sometimes it's important to be able to remind ourselves of those deeper motivations. That's what we need to tap into for a different type of action. Another way of thinking about this, if you were writing a letter to your younger self, what would be in that letter? What kind of advice would you give? What sorts of value from your lived experience would you provide? And then also in that exercise, something you take on for yourself fresh now, even though you sit with it. It may not be the kind of space that we're interrogating. Maybe it's for something else, not work, but of course, many of us were in this very room looking at orange skies during the fires recently. So what we're trying to do here in terms of integration is indeed data integration, policy integration, but it's also an integration of different types of our own intelligence. So with that, 2 more jobs for you all. The first is to have a look at the visual resonance. It's basically a reflection of what you've heard from the speakers and some of the summaries that we've heard today of what's coming through our discussions and our collective. So you all have papers, some flyers were put in your tables. You also have the request from PGA president. I would encourage you to flip that over and write for yourself as you reflect, and we'll ask Kelby to come up in a minute as well too. What stands out for you from the discussion today? What's different? What did it remind you of? What did it challenge you for? What new thing was it? What are those areas, right, that we are collectively interrogating? We need to take forward practically. So this may not be a type of meeting summary that you normally see. So I'm going to invite Kelby, who's been listening, to share her reflections as she created this, and
something so important. So, I wrote little notes. So this is another way of knowing, like someone who mentioned earlier. And this is a type of art that I consider social art, where it only exists because you're here and you're voicing your concerns and your ideas into the room. So I've been trying to extract highlights of what I've heard and synthesize that into one drawing that hopefully reflects the core intent of what was being said. And the next note is something on the content, which is the main, we were chatting earlier, and one of the main things that I picked up was the systems approach builds in feedback loops that keeps us united. There's no way we're separate if we're thinking in through a systems lens. And so when we talk about bridges and differences and how we break down barriers, I think of how artificial those are. Those are man-made, those barriers. And so, yeah, so I just was thinking, what harkens us back to a more natural way of being, something that's interdependent and recalling that way of really filtering and seeing things in our world. And so I was trying to represent that with this area that is like here you have sort of these orange fires that are separate, but then there's also the possibility of that same energy that separates us becoming something that weaves us together somehow. And I'll let you look at the image and find meaning in your own ways. And the last point, is that okay? Okay. Is that I want to thank Gabe Twan, who's here today and brought his daughter Iman, who's working with me for the summer, and she's 16, and she's been scribing alongside me too. And we couldn't put the two images up together, but we'll share back her image as well, which is very beautiful. And it just has reminded me that we're doing this for ourselves, but we're doing this for future generations. So Iman, thank you for coming. And thank you all.
So we'll have an opportunity also over lunch to come up and have a look at the image itself. Generally, when we're doing this in a smaller group, we would ask questions: what do you see, what do you sense, and what do you feel? And to also point, because those are normally the questions we ask ourselves at the end of the meeting. So you'll have that opportunity and invitation. As you're thinking about your personal commitments, and this is really what's so essential for all of us, we're going to again look for ways to interact with other sources of knowing. And for that, I'm really pleased to introduce the Resistance Revival Chorus. They're going to be providing a live performance, which is directly connected to what we're after here. And we'd like you to use this as an opportunity to do nothing at all, turn your minds off maybe just for a second, if you can. If not, if that connection is there for you, write it down exactly in the way that PTA President has encouraged us. What does it mean for you? What you will take out of this? Or what are those commitments that you plan on paying forward? So with that, I believe I move off the stage and they'll move on and enjoy.
Will
read them. And I do want to take 1 second to thank the team that made this happen. You have no idea how many people we came from different countries here today, but also over weeks and months been becoming these really close group of friends, as I was mentioning at the beginning, that wanted to create this space for you. So thank you. Anda, if you can please stand up. Sophie from the International Science Council, James, Lofton, I didn't know, we have Allison. We have Allison with an I, not a Y, right? From SDSM, we have Lauren. Please, Lauren, stand up. Allison with a Y this time. Ellen, Stephanie. Please, thank you so much. We have Asta from UNDESA here. Also, Harvey, stand up, Asta. Our awesome guys in the front, Nayara, Richard, all of the venue staff that you see here, of course, the security people, our friends at UNDP, my co-moderator, Lauren, of course, my heart, Tunde, Vincent, who's also involved, Janine, thank you. Monica is here also from SEI, we have Katie, we have Soha, stand up please. And we have Alex, Camilo, and Natalia who are not here, but we're also super involved in all of these times. Thank you, Lynn and Stefan from ISD Reporting Services for being here. Kelby for giving me my new screensaver for the computer. If you want it, you can share it. And Elian and Lucas making the video. Over there, smile for the camera. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. And now we have probably nothing else but to say thank you again. And please enjoy this space. We never get to do events and things like this, so go outside, enjoy the terrace, have some food, and mingle. So lunch, thank you.
You want to?
They have food. Yes.
Oh.